He used to smile without trying. He used to laugh so hard his daughter would copy him. Now, he's just a man standing at the edge of memory, haunted by the way she used to say his name, by the way his daughter stopped dancing, by the fear of losing her too. And then, a stranger showed up at his door. She didn't come to save anyone. She was running from something herself. But some people don't have to say much to make you feel again. Some people just sit beside your silence long enough for it to speak. Welcome, my beautiful family. Wherever you are in the world, I want you to know this: you're not alone. If you've ever loved someone so deeply that losing them made the air hard to breathe, then this story was meant to find you. So if you're part of this family, type, "I'm with you, Mr. Hearthline" in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because love has a way of finding its way back home. Let's begin. The hallway was silent. Too silent for a house that once held so much laughter. Elliot Callan stood there, staring at the staircase like it might collapse under the weight of memory. It had been 3 years since Lainey's smile lit up this place. 3 years since the hallway smelled of cinnamon candles and coconut shampoo. Now it smelled like bleach, medicine, and something colder. Upstairs, his daughter, Aubrey, lay still. She'd had another round of chemo that morning. Her small frame curled under the quilt Ray had brought last week, the one with sunflowers. Elliot had peeked in before coming downstairs. She hadn't even opened her eyes. He looked down at his hands. They still shook. There were toys scattered on the living room floor. Stuffed animals that hadn't been moved in days. A pair of sneakers by the front door, too small now, but he couldn't throw them out. And the pictures on the wall. Lainey's smile stared back at him from every frame. Her graduation cap barely fit over her curls. Her laugh seemed to echo through the glass. There was one photo, her holding Aubrey as a baby, forehead against forehead. That one crushed him most days. Today was no different. He reached out and straightened the frame. "Lainey," he whispered. His voice broke. "I don't know how to do this anymore." The house responded with silence. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it. Probably another update from the home health service or a reminder from the pharmacy. They all blended together now. He grabbed a glass of water and leaned against the fridge. For a moment, Elliot considered going back to bed. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept properly in days, weeks maybe, but there was a knock at the door, and it wasn't the kind of knock that gave you a choice. It was soft. 3 taps. Not urgent but not uncertain either. He opened it, and there she was. Ray Whitaker. Navy scrubs. Dark curls in a ponytail. No makeup. Just clean eyes, clear voice, and a clipboard tucked beneath one arm like a shield. She didn't smile, not yet, but something in her posture told him she understood the weight of quiet homes. "Mr. Callan?" she asked. He nodded, hesitating. He should have said yes or come in or something polite, but he couldn't form it. "I'm Ray," she said, "from the pediatric unit. I'll be handling Aubrey's care while Nurse Carla is on leave." Still no words from Elliot. Ray stepped inside anyway, carefully, like someone entering sacred ground. The house creaked beneath her steps. She scanned the space but didn't comment on the clutter, the dust, or the layers of grief still hanging in the air like forgotten coats. Elliot finally spoke. "She's upstairs. Sleeping." Ray nodded. "I brought her file. I won't wake her." She moved toward the kitchen table and began unpacking supplies. Syringes, gloves, a blood pressure cuff. All routine, but she handled each item like it mattered. Elliot stayed back, watching. "Do you always knock like that?" he asked, surprising himself. She looked up. "What do you mean?" "The knock. It was soft." Ray smiled faintly. Loud doors wake sleeping children. Something cracked in his chest. He led her upstairs, careful not to step on the creaky spot Lainey used to complain about. He remembered how she'd sing to Aubrey during late-night feedings, right in this stairwell. His legs almost gave out when he reached the landing. Ray peeked into the room. Aubrey was pale. her breathing shallow. But her bunny was tucked under one arm and Ray noticed. She sleeps with it every night? Ray asked. Elliot nodded. Lainey bought it the day Aubrey was born. She has good taste, Ray murmured. He didn't respond. Ray lowered herself to a knee beside the bed. She didn't touch Aubrey yet, just studied her vitals, checked the lines, recorded notes. Quiet, respectful. She didn't rush. She's beautiful, Ray said softly. Just like her mom, I imagine. Elliot blinked. You read her chart? No. I saw the photo by the stairs. Another crack in his chest. Downstairs again. Ray washed her hands at the kitchen sink, looked around and said, Would you mind if I brought a few coloring books next time? Maybe a sticker set? He shrugged. You can bring whatever keeps her awake longer. There was a pause. Is there a song she likes? Ray asked. He looked away. Lainey used to sing her Edelweiss. Before everything. Ray nodded, not pushing. That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. Again. He walked through the hallway barefoot, silent, and found himself in the attic for the first time. In months, dust covered every box. But in the far corner, half buried beneath old winter coats, he saw it. The music box. Cherrywood. Hand-carved. Lainey's grandmother had given it to her. He opened it. It didn't play. But the note inside was still there. He didn't read it. Not yet. Not tonight. Instead, he brought the box downstairs and left it quietly near Ray's nursing bag. Ray Whitaker sat in her compact car, engine off, hands wrapped tightly around the steering wheel. She didn't expect it to hit her this fast. The girl upstairs, Aubrey, was tiny, pale, far too still. But what caught Ray off guard wasn't the child. It was the father, Elliot Callan. He had the kind of grief etched into his face you didn't ask about. His voice was flat, eyes distant, like every part of him existed only to keep air flowing through that little girl's lungs. And when he spoke about Lainey, it was never directly, just small fragments, half-thoughts, memories disguised as routine. Ray finally exhaled and stepped out of the car again. She had forgotten her badge holder on the kitchen counter. Inside, Elliot was still at the table. Same position, same silence. He didn't flinch when she stepped in. I forgot this, she said, reaching for the lanyard. He nodded, still didn't move. You okay? Ray asked gently. Should I be? He replied, voice low. Fair question, but she didn't answer it. Instead, Ray opened her clipboard and scanned her notes. I'll need to adjust Aubrey's hydration levels. Her sodium's dropping and it's making her sluggish. Also, if she's not eating by Thursday, we'll have to consider a feeding tube. Elliot looked up for the first time in minutes. She hates those. I know. That's why I'm trying everything else first. A beat passed. Then he asked, why did they assign you this case? Rotation, Ray replied. I was next on the list. He didn't believe her. She could see it. Is that a problem? She added. No. Just, this house hasn't had strangers in a while. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Later that day, Ray returned with the sticker books she promised. She also brought socks with cartoon rabbits, a squishy frog toy, and a spray that made the room smell like orange creamsicles. She found Aubrey sitting up, barely. Her eyes fluttered open long enough to notice the new things. Her lips curled into something close to a smile. Hey, warrior, Ray whispered. Mind if I sit with you? Aubrey didn't respond, but her fingers loosened around her bunny. Ray sat, quietly, no fuss, just presence. She opened a sticker book and started placing stars on the pages herself. I'll put these here, she murmured. And when you feel strong, you can rearrange them. Deal? Aubrey blinked once. Cool, Ray said softly. We're a team now. Downstairs, Elliot hovered. He listened to Ray's voice drift through the stairwell. Low, warm, steady. No forced cheerfulness. No exaggerated sympathy. Just her. Lainey had always hated fake optimism. Said it made real hope harder to spot. Ray had none of that artificial brightness. She just was. He didn't realize he was holding the railing too tightly until his knuckles ached. He let go, walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it again without taking anything out. When Ray finally stepped down an hour later, she looked tired but not defeated. "She's resting," she said. "She spoke?" he asked. "She blinked." He nodded. "That's something." Ray moved toward the front door but paused halfway. "I don't want to overstep," she began. "But this house feels heavy. You might want to open a few windows. Let some air in." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that medical advice?" "No," she replied. "It's human advice." Ray came again the next morning. Same knock, same gentle rhythm. This time, Aubrey was already awake. Ray brought temporary tattoos of cartoon cats and a comb set. Aubrey pointed at her hair. "You want braids?" Ray asked. The girl nodded. Elliot watched from the doorway again, arms crossed. He hadn't spoken to anyone at length in weeks, but Ray seemed to fill every room without effort. She braided Aubrey's hair while humming softly, not a children's tune, but something classical and slow. It matched the pace of the room. "I used to be a hairdresser," Ray said over her shoulder. Elliot raised a brow. "You were?" She smirked. "No, but I watched a lot of YouTube videos in nursing school." Aubrey giggled. It was faint, but it was real, and Elliot felt it, like a string being pulled somewhere deep in his chest. When Ray packed up to leave, she looked at him directly. "Lainey was loved," she said. He froze. "What?" "I see it. All over this house. In how you fold Aubrey's socks. In the way every wall still remembers her." Elliot cleared his throat. "Do you always say things like that to your patients' families?" "Only when they need to hear it." There was no comeback to that. Just the quiet closing of the door behind her. Ray returned the next morning with a blanket she crocheted years ago but never gave anyone. It was yellow, bright, stubbornly cheerful. Aubrey reached for it the moment Ray unfolded it across her lap. "She likes sunshine," Ray said softly. Elliot nodded, standing behind her. "Lainey did too. Our entire wedding was yellow and white." Aubrey blinked slowly, tracing the blanket with her fingers. "Did Lainey make music too?" Ray asked, not turning. "She hummed a lot, sang off-key, but she loved music." Ray smiled to herself. That evening, as Elliot folded laundry downstairs, he looked toward the attic again. He hadn't gone back up since finding the music box 2 nights ago. But something pulled at him. He left the basket half-folded and made the climb. The attic smelled like dust and memory. He stepped carefully between boxes labeled Aubrey Newborn, Lainey's Things, and Summer, 2016. The music box was still on the shelf. Closed. He picked it up again. It didn't play, but this time he turned it over and found the key, slightly rusted, still attached. He wound it gently, once, twice, a soft click, and then it started. Edelweiss, not loud, just soft enough to fill the space. He sat down, let it play, let it hurt. Downstairs, Ray packed her bag. Aubrey had drifted into sleep. As Ray reached for her stethoscope, something wooden caught her eye. It was sitting beside her tote, delicate, polished, and clearly old. She opened the lid and tilted her head as the first few notes played. Edelweiss. Her brows furrowed. She didn't know who placed it there, but she had a feeling, and she understood what it meant. She took the box upstairs. Aubrey stirred. Ray sat beside her again and placed the music box near her pillow. "This song means something to your mommy and daddy," she whispered. "Did my mommy sing it?" Aubrey asked faintly. "She did. And now it's your song too." She played it again. Aubrey listened. No words, just long, slow blinking. Then suddenly, "Will I see her again?" Ray paused. "I believe so," she said. "But not yet." Elliot stood outside the door. He'd come to check in, but stopped when he heard the music playing. He pressed his forehead against the wall, eyes shut. The grief rose like smoke inside him. Not choking, but present. Always present. But this time it carried something else with it. A memory. Lainey dancing barefoot in the kitchen, swaying with Aubrey in her arms, laughing at nothing, singing Edelweiss in that off-key voice. That night, he didn't cry in the shower. He cried sitting on the stairs. Ray walked past him with quiet steps. She saw him, paused, but didn't interrupt. She simply sat on the lower step, not speaking, just close. The next morning, Elliot found a note in the kitchen. Ray's handwriting. She asked to hear the song 3 times. I think it's doing more than medicine ever could. Elliot folded it and slid it into his wallet, next to a photo of Lainey, from the day she became a mom. Later that evening, while Ray was brushing Aubrey's hair, Elliot finally spoke from the doorway. She would have liked you, he said. Ray looked up. Lainey, he clarified. She wasn't easy to impress. Ray smiled faintly. Neither are you. That made him chuckle quietly, but it was real. I'm just trying to keep things from falling apart, he said. You're doing more than that, Ray replied. You're keeping her world turning. He looked at Aubrey, and this time he didn't feel like a failure. When Ray left that evening, Elliot stood at the door and said, Thank you. For what? For playing the song. Ray paused. It was already here. I just pressed play. He nodded, then added, Thank you anyway. Lainey Hargrove had braces and no filter. The first time Elliot Callan saw her, she was yelling at a boy twice her size for stealing someone's lunch. 7th grade. Cafeteria. Tuna sandwich. Elliot watched her from the other end of the table, stunned and a little terrified. Lainey didn't back down. She got detention. And when she passed by Elliot's desk afterward, she winked like it was the best trade she ever made. That was the beginning. By 8th grade, they were lab partners. By 9th, best friends. And by 10th grade, Elliot had stopped pretending he wasn't in love with her. She wore a green hoodie almost every day and carried 2 extra pencils in her hair like makeshift chopsticks. She smelled like vanilla and cinnamon gum. And she laughed. Loud, sudden, unfiltered. He fell hard. Lainey didn't fall right away. She made him wait. But on a rainy afternoon after track practice, she finally kissed him behind the bleachers. You're not terrible at that, she said. He grinned for days. They were inseparable through high school. Prom pictures showed Lainey making faces while Elliot tried to look serious. Graduation day, she tackled him in the middle of the football field and screamed, We did it! Into his ear loud enough for the entire school to hear. They left for college 2 months later. Same city, different dorms, still together. Money was tight. Lainey worked at a bookstore. Elliot picked up shifts at a campus diner. They split gas, groceries, and late-night noodles. Every now and then, they argued about nothing, about everything, but they always came back to each other. Lainey had a habit of sticking affirmations on the bathroom mirror. You're still enough. Keep breathing. Love is loudest in the quiet. He kept every single one in a shoebox under the bed. After graduation, they rented a tiny apartment above a dry cleaner. The oven didn't work. The sink leaked. The floor creaked. They called it home anyway. One evening, Elliot set up fairy lights across the balcony with a friend's borrowed ladder. He cooked dinner, burnt pasta and undercooked meatballs, and panicked halfway through the speech he wrote. Lainey sat there smiling the whole time. I'm trying to propose, he finally blurted, holding out a modest silver ring. She laughed, loud and tearful, and said yes before he could finish the question. Their wedding was small. Backyard. Folding chairs. Homemade lemonade. Lainey wore a dress borrowed from her cousin and sneakers under the hem. Elliot cried through the vows. Their first dance wasn't choreographed. It was messy and real and perfect. They played a playlist of all their high school songs. At one point, she dragged him into a conga line with her cousins. Elliot hated dancing, but that day he didn't stop smiling. They moved into a new house a few weeks later. The one with the wraparound porch, Lainey said. She'd decorate with hanging plants and wind chimes. The one that would one day smell like pancakes on Sunday and warm socks in the laundry. 3 months in, they found out about Aubrey. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't unwelcome. Lainey cried happy tears on the bathroom floor with a plastic stick in one hand and the other, gripping Elliot's sleeve. He held her, heart racing, head spinning. "I don't know if we're ready," he admitted. She wiped her face. "We're not. But when have we ever waited until we were?" They both laughed. And that night, for the first time in their lives, the future felt like something they could reach out and touch. They started painting the nursery before they even knew the gender. Yellow walls, handmade shelves, a mobile with clouds and birds. Lainey played classical music near her belly and told Aubrey stories through her skin. "She's going to have your eyes," Lainey insisted. Elliot hoped so, but he also hoped she had Lainey's spirit, her courage, that impossible laugh. Aubrey was born on a stormy Tuesday night. The power went out in the hospital just as Lainey screamed through her last push. A minute later, they heard the cry. Elliot swore he never knew his heart could make that sound. She was perfect. Tiny, red-faced, furious. But perfect. He held her like she was made of stars. Lainey whispered, "We made that." He kissed her hand. "I know." They brought her home 2 days later. Lainey insisted on singing lullabies despite being off-pitch. Elliot watched them both from the doorway sometimes, stunned that this was real. The life they built, the love they lived. He thought it would last forever. Their first year of marriage was beautiful chaos. The house was always a little messy. A basket of unfolded laundry lived on the couch like furniture. Dishes piled up when Elliot worked late. And Lainey burned toast more often than not, but she danced while doing it. Mornings were rushed. Nights were sacred. They'd curl up on the old sectional with a bowl of popcorn between them and argue about movie endings. Lainey hated cliffhangers. Elliot didn't mind them. "Life's a cliffhanger," he once said. She threw popcorn at him. Aubrey was still an infant, and Elliot was still learning how to hold her without panicking. He'd double-check the baby monitor 6 times a night. Wake up just to watch her chest rise and fall. Sometimes he'd whisper, "You're real," as if the proof needed repeating. Lainey handled it all like she was born for it. Diaper changes in the dark. Midnight feeds. Wearing 2 different socks and still managing to rock Aubrey to sleep with one hand while answering work emails with the other. "How do you do it?" Elliot asked once. Lainey shrugged. "There's no magic. Just love and caffeine." Elliot worked for a marketing firm downtown. Long hours. Tight deadlines. He tried to be home by dinner, but it didn't always happen. One Thursday he walked in just after midnight, drained. He found the living room dark, except for the glow of string lights over the mantel and Lainey asleep on the floor next to Aubrey's bassinet. She had one arm flung over a stuffed bear, the other stretched toward their daughter. Elliot didn't wake her. He sat on the edge of the couch and just watched, the 2 halves of his heart sleeping in the same room. Their weekends were loud. Lainey would blast music, always too early, and cook pancakes that were more flour than fluff. Aubrey would sit in her high chair, smearing syrup across her face like war paint. Elliot would groan but smile through it. They had dance-offs in the kitchen, water fights during dishwashing. Lainey once turned their hallway into a bowling lane using soda bottles and a soccer ball. Elliot came home to find her wearing ski goggles and holding a spatula like a trophy. "We don't have cable," she said. "So I made our own entertainment." Sometimes they argued. Bills, babysitting, fatigue. But Lainey never let a fight linger past sundown. She'd wait until Aubrey was asleep, then pull Elliot into the backyard with a blanket and 2 mugs of cocoa even in summer. "We're allowed to be mad," she'd say. "But we're not allowed to forget we're in this together." Elliot would nod, and she'd reach for his hand, every time. One night, they sat on the porch after Aubrey finally slept through the night. Lainey rested her head on his shoulder. "I think we're doing okay," she whispered. Elliot looked up at the stars. "I think we're doing better than okay." She smiled. "Well, don't get cocky. They made traditions out of nothing. Tuesday tacos, even if they were just beans and cheese. Friday game nights where Lainey always cheated at Uno. Elliot tried to teach her chess. She flipped the board the first time she lost. Aubrey started walking just before her second birthday. Lainey cried. Elliot filmed it. They watched it 5 times that night and didn't sleep. They weren't rich. They weren't perfect. But they had everything that mattered. And Elliot truly believed, deep in his chest, that they had decades to go. Until she got tired. Not the usual tired. The kind of tired that stayed even after a full night's rest. The kind that no coffee could fix. She brushed it off at first. So did Elliot. Until one afternoon, she came home from the grocery store and nearly collapsed by the door. He caught her. And suddenly, everything stopped feeling normal. The doctor's office smelled like rubbing alcohol and bad news. Lainey sat on the exam table, her legs swinging slowly like a child's. She was pale, quieter than usual, fingers clasped together tight enough to whiten the knuckles. Elliot stood beside her, pretending to understand the clipboard in his hand. Charts, numbers, terminology that blurred together. "I'm sure it's nothing," Lainey said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. But it was something. The blood work came back flagged. So did the follow-ups. Bruises that hadn't healed. Fatigue that deepened. A low-grade fever that never broke. They kept it from Aubrey. "She's too young," Lainey whispered, sitting on the porch swing. "She doesn't need to carry this." Elliot sat beside her, unable to speak. His chest felt like it was holding back a wave. He took her hand and squeezed. The official diagnosis arrived on a Tuesday. Stage 3 lymphoma. Elliot nearly collapsed in the parking lot. He threw up behind the wheel while Lainey rubbed his back. "I'm the one with cancer," she said gently. "I know," he choked out. "Then why does it feel like you can't breathe?" He couldn't answer. Treatment began immediately. Chemo, radiation, blood transfusions. Their days became a schedule of appointments, side effects, and forced smiles. Lainey cut her hair before it started falling out. She handed the scissors to Elliot and said, "You better not mess this up." He cried the whole time. She didn't. Aubrey was 3, too young to understand. They told her mommy was sick, and the medicine made her sleepy. She drew pictures of superheroes in capes and said, "This one's for mommy." Lainey taped every single one to the fridge. Even when the edges curled and the colors faded, she wouldn't take them down. Elliot became more than a husband. He became her nurse, her cook, her driver, her advocate. He learned how to clean central lines, how to manage the nausea, how to change bandages. Without flinching, he memorized the names of every medication and every nurse on Lainey's care team. She called him her knight. He didn't feel brave, just desperate. The house changed again. No more dance-offs in the kitchen. No more Saturday pancakes. Lainey still tried. When she could, she sang off-key lullabies to Aubrey or made jokes from the recliner. But most days she was too tired to get out of bed. Elliot kept up a routine for Aubrey's sake. He smiled when it hurt, laughed when he wanted to scream. Every night, he sat by Lainey's bedside and held her hand until she fell asleep. Every night, he stayed awake long after she closed her eyes. She fought for 2 years. There were good days, bad days, days that blurred together. Once they all went to the zoo, just the 3 of them. Lainey wore a hat to cover her hair, held onto Elliot like she might fall, and smiled through every photo. That day she looked like herself again. Elliot would later scroll through those photos like they were pages from a book he couldn't finish. One Sunday morning, just before sunrise, Lainey took one deep breath in, and didn't take another. Elliot was holding her hand. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat there, waiting for her to open her eyes again. She never did. He told Aubrey with a whisper, "Mommy's sleeping now." For a long time, Aubrey asked if she could leave her bunny beside the bed. Elliot said yes. She tucked it in under Lainey's arm, then turned around and walked out of the room. The funeral was quiet. Lainey didn't want black clothes or long speeches. She wanted yellow flowers, the song Edelweiss, and no tears if possible. Elliot failed at the last part. He stood at the front and tried to speak. But all that came out was, "She made everything brighter." He kept the house exactly the way it was for a while. Her toothbrush in the cup. Her shoes by the door. her music playlists saved to the speaker app. Every evening, he sat on the couch and watched the spot where she used to sit. Every morning, he opened the fridge and saw Aubrey's superhero drawings. The fridge became a shrine. And then came the call. Aubrey had been more tired than usual. Bruising on her legs. Fevers that wouldn't go down. The same words. The same tone from a different doctor. Felt like the ground split beneath him. Not again. Not his daughter. Ray Whitaker never thought she'd be the woman standing at the altar alone. But 3 weeks before her wedding, she was. It happened over coffee. Not a fight. Not a dramatic explosion. Just a quiet sentence that shattered the life she'd spent years building. "I don't think you love me," her fiancé said. She blinked. "What?" He stirred his drink. "Not me. You love your work. Your patience. You'd rather stay in a hospital room than be in our home." Ray didn't respond right away. She couldn't. Then came the second blow. "You'd make a great mother to someone else's child. But I don't think you know how to turn it off when the shift ends." He left the cafe. She sat there for 37 minutes before realizing he wasn't coming back. The ring stayed in her drawer for 2 days. The dress hung in the hallway, untouched, zipped up in a plastic bag that now felt like a casket. She didn't cancel the wedding right away. She just stopped planning it. Her friends called. Her sister offered to fly in. Ray said she was fine. She wasn't. Chicago felt smaller after that. Every street reminded her of him. Every grocery aisle held a memory. Every hospital corridor echoed their old plans, dreams of starting a family, of living near the lake, of growing old in their favorite bookstore. She transferred departments. That didn't help. She tried therapy. That helped a little. Then she opened her laptop at midnight and typed pediatric hospice jobs, out of state. She landed in Maple Glen 4 weeks later. Population. Barely enough to fill a stadium. She told herself it was temporary. A pause. A way to breathe without running into old ghosts. Her first morning. She stared at the hospital's brick exterior and whispered, "Don't fall apart." Then she walked inside. The staff were kind but distant. They called her the city girl behind her back. She didn't mind. She didn't come to make friends. She came to reset. New badge. New schedule. No distractions. She took on rotating cases, mostly children in late-stage conditions. Families that needed more peace than miracles. Parents who didn't ask too many questions. Kids who smiled through pain. She told herself she wouldn't get attached. She lied. There was one patient, a girl named Lainey, 5 years old. Terminal neuroblastoma. Ray stayed late every night that week. She held her hand through the 4 flush. Read her picture books. Sang to her when the machines beeped too loud. Lainey passed away on a Friday afternoon. Ray didn't clock out for 2 hours. She just sat in the parking lot, staring at her hands. That weekend, the supervisor approached her with a different assignment. Home-based, pediatric, intensive. A single father, the supervisor said. Wife passed. Daughter has leukemia. Prognosis, uncertain. He's difficult. Ray hesitated. The supervisor added, "He's not rude, just frozen." She almost said no. Then she remembered the girl's name. Aubrey. That name stayed with her. So did the file. She read it in bed that night. Twice. She highlighted notes, jotted down questions, and stared at the small photo paper clipped to the top corner. Big eyes. Bald head. A stuffed bunny in her lap. Ray closed the folder and whispered, "Okay." She didn't expect much when she knocked on the door. Certainly not the man who opened it. Elliot Callan looked like someone had unplugged his heart and left it to flicker on backup power. Not rude. Not cold. Just dimmed. He didn't invite her in. Just stepped aside. She understood. The first day, she stayed for less than an hour. The second, 2 hours. By the end of the week, she'd memorized where Aubrey kept her bunny, which drawer held the thermometer, and how many stairs creaked on the way up. She didn't talk to Elliot much, but she watched him. He moved like someone constantly bracing for more loss. She recognized it. It was the same way she looked in mirrors after the wedding that never was. One afternoon, Ray brought sticker books. Aubrey blinked, then smiled. It was the first time Ray felt anything like right since arriving in Maple Glen. And for the first time in months, she didn't think about what she'd lost. She thought about what could still be healed. Ray arrived at the Callan house early Monday morning. She waited in her car for 5 minutes before stepping out. Something about this house felt different. It wasn't the white siding or the porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. It wasn't even the overgrown lawn or the quiet that wrapped around the place like a thick sweater. It was the silence. The kind that settles after something breaks and no one picks up the pieces. Elliot answered the door in a t-shirt and flannel pants. His hair was messy, but his face was clean-shaven. He looked like he hadn't slept. "I'm not good at this," he said instead of hello. Ray nodded. "That's okay. I am." She stepped inside and looked around. There were toys neatly lined up on the couch. Medical supplies stacked on the counter. Half-eaten bowl of cereal in the sink. On the wall above the staircase, a collage of family photos. Ray didn't stare, but she saw enough to recognize the missing presence. The woman with the curls. The smile that pulled focus. The love that lived in every frame. Lainey. Aubrey was in bed when Ray checked in. She was smaller than Ray expected. Too quiet for a child. Her eyes opened just enough to acknowledge Ray's presence. Then closed again. Ray sat beside her, gently placed 2 fingers on her wrist, and waited for the monitor to steady. The bunny in her arms had a patch missing from one ear. "Battle bunny?" Ray asked softly. Aubrey blinked once. It was almost a smile. Downstairs, Elliot hovered near the coffee machine like he didn't know how to use it. Ray entered quietly. "She's resting," Ray reported. "Her vitals are okay for now. Color's still low." He nodded, staring at the machine. "She's always tired," he said after a beat. "She used to bounce. Everywhere. Kids bounce until they can't," Ray said. "But it comes back." Elliot didn't answer. She didn't expect him to. Each day after that, Ray arrived a little earlier. She brought snacks she knew Aubrey liked. Grapes, yogurt with sprinkles, juice in the box with a purple straw. Sometimes Aubrey would try a bite. Other times she just hugged her bunny tighter. But Ray always spoke to her like she was fully awake, fully present. "Want to paint your nails?" Ray asked on Thursday. Aubrey lifted one tiny finger. "Pink." Ray smiled. "Got it." The house slowly began to shift. Not dramatically, not instantly, but the air changed. Elliot started leaving cups of coffee on the counter for Ray, never handing them to her, just setting them down without a word. Ray noticed. She never said thank you, but she took the cup every time. On Friday, Ray brought a small portable speaker. She placed it near Aubrey's bed and pressed play. Soft classical music filled the room. Nothing loud, just strings and piano. Aubrey turned toward the sound, and for the first time in a while, Ray saw something move behind those eyes. "Do you want to sit outside tomorrow?" Ray asked. Aubrey blinked twice. "Okay," Ray whispered. "We'll make it happen." When Ray walked downstairs, Elliot was folding laundry. It looked forced, like he was doing it out of duty, not peace. "She asked to go outside," Ray said. Elliot looked up. "She hasn't asked for anything in weeks." "Well," she asked with her eyes. He nodded slowly. Ray stepped closer. "I think it might be time to open the windows." Elliot exhaled, then said, "One at a time." That weekend they sat on the porch. Ray beside Aubrey, Elliot watching from the steps. Aubrey wore a hat Ray brought, yellow with sunflowers stitched on the brim. She looked small, but in that moment not sick. She looked like a child. And Ray smiled, not because everything was okay, but because this moment was a win, even if only for today. The days turned into rhythm. Ray arrived at 7:45 sharp, knocked softly 3 taps. The door was always unlocked. She greeted Elliot with a nod. No pleasantries, no awkward small talk. She went straight upstairs, checked Aubrey's vitals, warmed her hands before touching the thermometer, and sat beside her for as long as the girl could handle. Then, when Aubrey drifted off, Ray would take her notes and disappear downstairs. Elliot would pretend not to watch her leave every time. One evening, Ray stayed late. Aubrey had been restless all afternoon, twitching through her nap, mumbling about her bunny, her mom, and something about clouds. Ray calmed her with a cold cloth and a storybook. She didn't leave until almost 9 p.m. As she grabbed her bag and headed to the door, Elliot finally spoke. "You didn't have to stay that long." Ray paused. "I didn't have to, but I wanted to." Elliot didn't answer. She waited, then walked out into the quiet night air. The next morning, Ray brought a tiny potted plant. "It's not a toy," she said, placing it on the windowsill. "But it's alive." Aubrey stared at it. "Wanna help me name it?" Ray asked. Aubrey whispered, "Sunny." Ray smiled. "Perfect." From the hallway, Elliot heard everything. He felt something behind his ribs he hadn't felt in months. Saturday came with rain. Ray still showed up, wet curls tucked under a scarf, her shoes squeaking slightly on the hardwood. "Didn't think you'd come in today," Elliot said, looking at her soaked jacket. "She asked for me yesterday," Ray replied. "I don't ignore that." He held her gaze longer than usual, then reached for a towel and handed it to her without a word. That afternoon, while Aubrey slept, Ray sat in the kitchen. Elliot brewed 2 cups of tea. He slid one toward her. Still didn't sit down. "She's changed," he said. Ray nodded. "Kids respond to presents." He leaned against the counter. "You don't talk much about yourself." "Neither do you," she replied. He considered that, then said, "That obvious?" "Only to people who see it every day." Their eyes met. Something shifted, but neither moved. Later that week, Ray found herself humming in the kitchen. Elliot was sorting through medical bills, half listening. "That song," he said. "Where do I know it from?" "It's from a cartoon," Ray replied. "My niece used to play it on repeat." "You have a niece?" "2. One lives for glitter. The other cries every time a balloon pops." Elliot chuckled. Ray paused. "I never planned to be a nurse forever." "What was the plan?" "Marriage. Family. Home full of kids." "What happened?" "Wrong person. Right lesson." Elliot didn't press. He just nodded. It was enough. One evening, Ray fell asleep on the couch. Aubrey had a rough day. Low energy, poor appetite, slight fever. Ray stayed late, just in case. She curled up with a blanket and closed her eyes for what was supposed to be 5 minutes. Elliot found her an hour later. He didn't wake her. He brought a second blanket, placed it gently over her shoulders, and sat nearby. He looked at her as if trying to remember what peace looked like. In the morning, Ray stirred, sat up fast. "I'm so sorry." "You're fine," Elliot said softly. "You needed rest too." Their eyes held. No words followed. But something in the silence said, "I see you." That night, Ray sat in her car with her hands gripping the steering wheel. Not out of fear, but because of what she felt inside. Something she hadn't allowed in a long time. Something dangerous. Something like hope. Monday morning arrived with sunlight and a surprising sound. Giggles. Elliot was pouring coffee when he heard it. Aubrey's laugh, high, small, but unmistakable, floated down the staircase. He froze. It had been weeks since that sound lived in this house. Upstairs, Ray was kneeling beside Aubrey's bed, holding a pink plastic cape and a makeshift wand made from a tongue depressor and aluminum foil. "Presenting," Ray said in a royal tone. "The one and only Battle Bunny Princess Warrior." Aubrey held the bunny like it had just returned from a royal crusade. She beamed. Ray placed a tiara on the bunny's head, 2 bobby pins and a ribbon. Aubrey clapped, the blanket shifting with emotion. "You forgot the shield," she whispered. "Oh no," Ray gasped. "Unacceptable. Emergency protocol. Glitter sticker armor activated." She peeled star-shaped stickers from her pocket and started placing them on the bunny's belly. Aubrey was breathless with laughter. Elliot stood at the door. He didn't say a word, just watched. Ray glanced at him once, gave a slight nod, then returned to her patient. No one needed to say anything. After the laughter settled, Ray coaxed Aubrey into sipping a bit of juice and eating 2 bites of banana. "Victory snack," she declared. Aubrey gave a thumbs up. Ray looked up to see Elliot still standing by the door. "She's responding better," she said. "The appetite's small, but it's progress." He nodded, then stepped inside fully. "She smiled at you." "She smiles at her bunny. I'm just backup." "You brought the smile. Doesn't matter what delivered it." Ray looked down, gently touched the bunny's ribbon crown, then whispered, "She's teaching me more than I'm teaching her." Later that afternoon, Ray set up a chair beside Aubrey's bed and pulled out a coloring book. She colored, slowly and quietly, while Aubrey dozed. The room was peaceful, still warm with laughter. Downstairs, Elliot tidied the kitchen. Without dread, without pressure, just moving. It was the first time he played music while doing chores. Lainey's old playlist. Soft acoustic. Guitar. When Ray came down, she noticed. "You're playing her music," she said. He looked up. Felt like today needed it. Ray nodded. "It fits." That evening, Ray and Elliot sat on the back porch. Aubrey was asleep. Monitors stable. The bunny curled under her arm. They sat in silence, sipping tea. The wind moved gently through the trees. "I haven't seen her that bright in a long time," Elliot said. Ray didn't look at him. She just needed permission. Permission. To live again, even just for an hour. Elliot looked down at his cup. "I haven't felt like her dad lately. More like her gatekeeper." "You've been her fortress," Ray said gently. "But even fortresses need sunlight." The porch light flickered. Neither of them moved. Elliot shifted slightly. "Do you ever miss the city?" Ray shrugged. "Some nights. The noise. The late diners. The anonymity. But you stayed here. For her," Ray said. "And maybe for something else I can't name yet." Their eyes met briefly. Nothing spoken. Everything understood. That night, Elliot walked past Aubrey's room and peeked in. She was sleeping soundly. The music box sat beside her. Closed. A single sticker star sparkled on her pillowcase. Elliot closed the door gently, then leaned against it for a moment. The house didn't feel so heavy anymore. In the guest room, Ray unfolded her overnight bag. She hadn't planned to stay this long. But when she looked at the sunflower hat on the dresser, and the drawing Aubrey gave her, that afternoon, a crayon sketch of Nurse Ray and Battle Bunny, she smiled, and unpacked a little more. Tuesday night brought something unusual. Elliot cooked. Not microwaved. Not takeout. Real food. Ray arrived earlier than usual and was greeted by the scent of garlic, olive oil, and something that might have been roasted vegetables. She stepped into the kitchen, eyebrows raised. "You're cooking." Elliot glanced over his shoulder. Sheepish. "I figured I should use the stove for something, besides boiling water." Ray smiled. "Looks ambitious." I googled easy meals for tired parents. This was recipe number 2. Ray peeked into the oven. And recipe number 1? Burnt toast with peanut butter. Aubrey was sitting at the table in her chair, a coloring book open in front of her. Ray knelt beside her. "How's the warrior doing today?" Aubrey pointed to a picture she'd drawn. 3 stick figures holding hands. One had a bun. One had glasses. The third had a bunny in its arms. Ray tapped the figure with the bun. "That me?" Aubrey nodded. Elliot saw from the kitchen. His throat tightened. Dinner was simple: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed carrots. No seasoning. Masterpieces. Just food made with hands that hadn't prepared a full meal since Lainey died. They sat at the table, all 3 of them. Felt like a holiday, even though it was just a Tuesday. Aubrey ate half a spoonful of mashed potatoes. Then a second. "That's more than yesterday," Ray said. Elliot smiled faintly. "Progress." Ray passed the carrots to him. "Tomorrow she might eat 3. Tomorrow I might burn them." Then we'll celebrate with ice cream. Aubrey perked up at the word ice cream. Ray winked. Only if Battle Bunny earns it. The meal stretched longer than expected. Not because of the food, but because no one wanted it to end. They talked about music, cartoons, Ray's old college roommate who once trained her cat to use the toilet. Aubrey laughed so hard she hiccuped. Elliot stared at her in awe, not because she laughed, but because he remembered that sound from a life that felt like it. Ended 3 years ago. Now it was here again. Alive. After clearing the dishes, Ray began drying while Elliot washed. You do realize I've been here almost every day for a month, and this is the first time you let me help with dishes. Elliot grinned. I didn't want to scare you off. Scrubbing a plate might have done it, Ray teased. They bumped shoulders as he handed her a wet bowl. Neither moved away. They settled in the living room afterward. Aubrey curled up on the couch, head resting against Ray's arm. The TV played some animated show no one was really watching. Elliot sat across from them, sipping warm tea. Lainey's blanket lay folded neatly on the ottoman. Ray glanced at it. Was this hers? She asked. Elliot nodded. She made it while pregnant with Aubrey. Ray unfolded it gently and draped it over the child. Aubrey murmured, Mommy used to tuck me in like that. Ray brushed a hand across her forehead. Then I'll keep doing it the same way. Elliot blinked, then looked away. When Ray rose to leave that night, Aubrey sat up weakly. You coming back tomorrow? Of course, Ray said. Aubrey held out her bunny. Can you bring him a friend? Ray nodded. I know just the one. At the door, Elliot hesitated before speaking. Tonight felt. Ray waited. Normal, he finished. Ray nodded. She needed that. He paused. I did too. Their eyes met. Quiet moment. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Just real. Then Ray stepped into the night. Wednesday came with cloud cover and quiet. Ray arrived carrying a small stuffed giraffe with lopsided ears and a crooked smile. She held it behind her back as she stepped into Aubrey's room. The little girl sat propped up against 2 pillows, her bunny in one arm. I brought backup, Ray whispered. Aubrey's eyes lit up as Ray revealed the giraffe. His name is Waffles, she said. He's new to the team. Aubrey took him gently, setting him beside Battle Bunny. They're friends now, she said. Ray smiled. Good. Friends are how we fight the hard days. Downstairs, Elliot was finishing paperwork, medical expenses, insurance forms, treatment, updates. He looked tired, but not worn. Distracted, but not detached. Ray joined him in the kitchen, slipping off her sweater. She's already attached to Waffles, she said. I figured, Elliot replied. She used to collect plush toys like they were family members. Ray poured tea. She still does. They sat at the table not as nurse and father, but something else neither had named yet. Later that afternoon, Ray was rearranging the bookshelf in Aubrey's room when Elliot walked in, holding something, a jewelry box, wooden, simple, faded near the edges. Lainey kept notes in this, he said. Quotes, letters, things she wrote to herself, sometimes to Aubrey, sometimes to me. Ray accepted it gently. I haven't opened it since her funeral, he added. Why now? She asked. Because the house doesn't feel like a grave anymore. That night, after Aubrey fell asleep, Ray stood in the kitchen, drying her hands. Elliot leaned against the counter, quiet, studying her without speaking. You okay? She asked. He nodded, slowly. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. If you hadn't come here, if this hadn't been your case, where would you be right now? Ray thought for a moment. Probably still in a city that didn't know my name. Still trying to make peace with an empty apartment. Elliot exhaled through his nose. I'm glad you came. She looked at him, soft but steady. So am I. A beat passed. Then two. The silence thickened. Not awkward. Just loaded. Elliot stepped a little closer. Not touching. Just near. You make her feel safe, he said. Ray's voice was low. And you make her feel loved. Their eyes held. long enough for something to be said without words. Then, the doorbell rang. They both flinched. Elliot answered it while Ray stayed in the hallway. Courier. Small envelope. Thin. White. Elliot opened it and frowned. Everything okay? Ray asked. He nodded, though his jaw tightened. Boston Children's Hospital, he said. They offered you something, didn't they? Ray blinked. How did you? It's postmarked. She stepped forward. It's just a letter. It's a better job, Elliot said. Better title. Bigger hospital. Ray didn't answer. Not yet. Later, as she packed up her bag, Elliot stood at the door, watching her. You don't owe us anything, he said. Ray paused. That's not what this is. Then what is it? She looked him in the eye. It's something I haven't figured out how to walk away from. He didn't stop her when she left. But he didn't go back inside right away either. He just stood there, staring at the porch, like he was afraid of losing something again. That night, Ray sat on the edge of her bed in silence. The offer letter lay unopened in her lap. She didn't read it. She didn't have to. The real decision was already happening inside her, and she knew it had nothing to do with hospitals, pay grades, or prestige. It had everything to do with a child's laugh, and the man who smiled a little more every time he heard it. Ray stared at the letter again the next morning. It was still unopened, sitting on her kitchen counter like a dare. She didn't move it, didn't touch it, just kept glancing at it like it might decide for her. Her phone buzzed. Not a text. A calendar reminder. Decision deadline. Boston offer. She silenced it. The day started like usual. Same quiet knock. Same unspoken rhythm. But everything felt off. Elliot opened the door, tired eyes meeting hers. He didn't ask about the letter. She didn't bring it up. Aubrey was already awake upstairs, flipping through her sticker book. Her bunny and giraffe were perched on either side like bodyguards. Ray kissed the top of her head. Guess what? She whispered. What? I brought Waffles a cape. Aubrey grinned. Battle Bunny will share his sword. Downstairs, Elliot poured coffee. He didn't ask Ray to sit. She didn't linger. There was a quiet understanding between them now, built on too many nearly spoken things. By noon, Ray stepped outside to take a call. The hospital coordinator from Boston. Friendly. Enthusiastic. We're finalizing things. Just need your response. Ray hesitated. I'll call back, she said, then hung up. She stood on the porch for a long time, her eyes tracing the tree line like it held an answer. Inside, Elliot was watching her from the kitchen window. He didn't want her to go, but he didn't want to ask her to stay, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. That evening, Ray packed a bag, just in case. She folded her scrubs, placed her stethoscope in its case, took the sunflower pin from her hair, and tucked it in a side pouch. She walked slowly through her apartment, fingers grazing shelves, books, photos. No roots, just objects. Nothing here had asked her to stay, except her gut. Elliot was reading to Aubrey when Ray returned for her evening round. He stopped mid-sentence when Ray walked in. Aubrey's eyes lit up. Waffles wants a bedtime story, she whispered. Ray smiled. Then let's give him the best one. She sat down beside them, shoulder brushing Elliot's as she opened a new book. The three of them read together, and for a while the air felt light again. Later, as Ray gathered her things, Elliot followed her to the hallway. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You leaving soon? He asked. Ray nodded. Tomorrow. Maybe. Boston. They need an answer. And do you have one? She paused. I thought I did. He looked at her. Really looked. Not the nurse. Not the helper. Just Ray. I won't stop you, he said quietly. I know. But I also won't pretend this house doesn't feel different when you're in it. Ray's eyes filled, but she blinked it back. I'm scared, she said. Of what? Of staying? And losing again. Elliot stepped closer. His voice softened. You're not the only one. That night Ray didn't sleep. She repacked her bag. then unpacked it again. Then sat at her window and waited for the sun. Still unsure, but somehow not lost. It happened without warning. One moment, Aubrey was sitting up in bed, placing stickers on Waffle's belly while Ray braided her hair into 2 loose plaits. The next, her head slumped forward. Her hands twitched, and then she stopped responding. Aubrey. Ray's voice was sharp, immediate. Hey, look at me. Aubrey. No answer. Her skin turned gray, eyes half closed, lips losing color. Ray was already moving, checking pulse, peeling back eyelids, pressing her stethoscope to a chest that wasn't keeping up. Then she shouted, Elliot! He was downstairs. The sound of Ray's voice made him sprint. One look at his daughter, limp, barely breathing, and his legs almost gave out. Ray caught his arm. Call 911. Now. His fingers shook as he dialed. Ray kept talking to Aubrey the entire time, calmly, steadily. Stay with me, sweetheart. You're not done. Battle Bunny still needs you. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes. To Elliot, it felt like 40. Ray never left Aubrey's side, not for a second. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she climbed in with her, tightening the buckle herself. She needs oxygen and full cardiac monitoring now, Ray told the medics. She's not family, one of them said, uncertain. Elliot's voice cut in, firm and clear. She stays. That was the last thing he said before the doors slammed shut. In the ambulance, Ray squeezed Aubrey's hand. The monitors beeped in irregular rhythms. But Ray kept whispering. Not to fill silence, but to remind the child she wasn't alone. You're a fighter. You've got more story to live. This isn't where it ends. At the hospital, nurses moved fast. Doctors issued orders. Ray briefed them all like one of their own. She didn't sit down. She didn't cry. She stayed locked in, present, unwavering. Only when they moved Aubrey into the pediatric ICU did someone turn to her and say, You're not on staff here, are you? No, Ray replied. But she's mine too. Elliot arrived 20 minutes later. He found Ray in the hallway outside the ICU, her back against the wall, hands still stained with antiseptic. She looked up when he approached. I thought I lost her, he whispered. Ray shook her head slowly. She's stable. For now. He collapsed onto the bench beside her, elbows on his knees. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. After a long silence, Ray finally said, I was going to leave. Elliot turned to her, eyes rimmed red. I know. I had the letter in my bag, had the offer, had everything lined up. But you stayed. I couldn't walk away. His voice cracked. I'm glad you didn't. A doctor appeared with an update. Oxygen was holding. Fever had broken. Blood work still uncertain. They would monitor through the night. Elliot nodded, barely hearing. Ray stood first. I'll stay, she said. You need rest, he replied. I need to see her wake up. In the darkened ICU room, Ray pulled a chair beside Aubrey's bed. Elliot stood in the doorway. Ray reached forward and brushed a strand of hair off the girl's forehead. She's stronger than she looks, Ray whispered. Elliot nodded. So are you. For the first time, he placed his hand over Ray's. Warm, firm, grateful. I've lost so much, he said. I don't know how to hold on to things anymore. Ray turned to him. Then let me hold her for both of us, until you're ready again. Ray stayed all night. Not on a cot. Not outside the room. In a chair. Upright, alert, one hand gently resting near Aubrey's fingers. The monitors beeped steady now. Oxygen level stable. Color returning slowly to the child's cheeks. But Ray didn't move. She wouldn't risk missing a single moment. Elliot came back just after dawn. He'd left for a few hours to shower, change clothes, and check on the house. Everything felt foreign without Aubrey inside. When he returned, he saw Ray exactly where he left her. Eyes heavy, back straight, hands still close to the child's. He whispered, You didn't sleep. Ray replied without looking away. Neither did she. At 7:42 a.m., Aubrey stirred. It was subtle, just a twitch of her brow. Then her lips parted. Her eyes fluttered open. Ray leaned forward. "Hey, sunshine." Aubrey blinked, dazed, then managed a raspy whisper. "Where's Waffles?" Ray exhaled a soft laugh. Relief and emotion tangled in one sound. "He's guarding your bunny. At home." Elliot choked back a smile from the doorway. His daughter was awake. A nurse came in to check vitals. Another followed with fluids and lab requests. Ray stepped back to give them space, but she didn't leave the room. Elliot joined her near the window. "She asked for a stuffed giraffe before asking for me," he said, trying to sound amused. Ray smirked. "Giraffes are less dramatic." He laughed, then turned serious. "Thank you for staying." "You don't have to say that." "I do," Elliot replied. "You could have left." Ray was quiet for a moment. Then she said it. "I tried." She stepped into the hallway, voice low but sure. "I packed my bag, signed the offer, had it ready to send." Elliot followed her, listening. "I sat in my apartment, thinking about airports and new ID badges and what it would feel like to start over again." She paused. "And all I could think about was her laugh, and the way she holds her bunny, and how you pour coffee like it's the only thing keeping you from falling apart." He swallowed hard. "I didn't leave," Ray said, "because something told me I wasn't finished here." Elliot leaned against the wall beside her. "You know, Lainey once told me," he began, then stopped. "What?" Ray asked gently. "She said if something ever happened to her, she hoped someone would show up, not to replace her, but to carry what she couldn't anymore." Ray met his gaze. "I'm not trying to take her place. I know. But you've done something she'd be grateful for." Ray's eyes glistened. "What's that?" "You made our daughter want to live again." They sat together on the bench outside the ICU. The hallway buzzed with the shuffle of nurses, the quiet murmur of doctors, the hum of machines behind glass. But in that pocket of space, time felt still. Ray rested her head on Elliot's shoulder. For a moment, neither spoke. They didn't need to. A few hours later, as the day warmed and sunlight poured through the hospital windows, Elliot made a phone call. Not to the doctor, not to a family member, to Ray's number. She answered even though she was just 2 floors below. "You said you signed the letter," he said. "I did. Did you send it?" She hesitated. "No, don't." Ray's voice wavered. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in 3 years." A long silence. Then she whispered, "Okay." Ray returned home for the first time in 4 days. She didn't unpack. She didn't sleep. She just stood in the doorway, keys still in hand, staring at the silence that greeted her. A single envelope sat on the kitchen counter, the one from Boston. She slid it into a drawer without opening it. The next morning, she arrived at the Callan house just after sunrise. The door was already unlocked. Elliot was in the living room holding a small music box, the same one Ray had seen weeks ago, the one that played Edelweiss. But this time he wasn't holding it for the melody. He held it for what was hidden inside. "I found something," he said, his voice low. Ray approached. He opened the lid, reached under the velvet lining, and pulled out a folded piece of stationery. "Lainey's handwriting," he added. "I didn't know it was there." Ray took the letter gently. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was short, faded in some places, but unmistakably personal. "Elliot, if I'm gone, let her feel love again. Let someone braid her hair. Let someone stay. If Aubrey calls her mommy one day, smile. It means she felt safe. Lainey." Ray stared at the words as if they were sacred. She read it twice, then pressed it to her chest. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she whispered. Elliot met her eyes. "You already are." They didn't speak much after that. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because the letter had said everything that needed to be heard. Elliot placed it back inside the music box and set it on the mantel. Ray stood by the window, watching the sunlight stretch across the lawn. "Do you ever feel like you're being handed something too big?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said. "Every day since I lost her." And every day since I almost lost Aubrey. He turned toward her. But now it doesn't feel as heavy. That afternoon, Aubrey was discharged. The house came alive the moment she stepped back inside. Ray helped her to the couch, tucked a blanket around her and lined up Battle Bunny and Waffles beside her like guards at attention. Elliot walked in holding 3 bowls of ice cream. "Doctor's orders," he said. Aubrey giggled. "Battle Bunny wants sprinkles." Ray added a handful without hesitation. Later, Ray stepped into the hallway to give father and daughter a moment. She passed the photo wall and paused at the last frame. Lainey holding newborn Aubrey, eyes full of joy, curls wild and free. Ray whispered under her breath, "She's still here. I feel it." Behind her, Elliot said, "So do I." That evening, Ray returned to her apartment and stood in front of her suitcase. Still packed, still zipped, still ready. She sat on the floor, took a deep breath, and began unpacking, piece by piece. Before she left for the night, she reached for her journal. She didn't write anything poetic. No paragraphs, no drawn-out thoughts, just one line. "I stayed." Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and soft wind. Elliot stood at the foot of the stairs, holding a picnic basket in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. "Field trip," he said. Aubrey blinked. "Where?" "You'll see." She looked at Ray. "Are you coming too?" Ray smiled, already tying her shoes. "Wouldn't miss it." They drove for 15 minutes. Past the town square. Past the ice cream shop. Past the street where Lainey used to hold Aubrey's hand as they walked to the corner bookstore. Elliot turned down a gravel path that led to an open park tucked between 2 hills. Quiet place. A familiar one. They reached the bench just as the wind picked up again. Old, wooden, slightly crooked. Elliot set the basket down and gently lowered Aubrey onto the seat, placing a soft cushion. Beneath her, Ray sat on one side of the bench, Elliot on the other. Aubrey looked around. "This place is pretty." "It's special," Elliot said. He reached into the basket and pulled out a thermos, 2 cups, and a paper bag filled with muffins. "This is where I came the day after Lainey died," he said. Ray looked at him gently, surprised. "I didn't want anyone to see me fall apart," he added. "So I came here, and I cried until I couldn't. Feel my hands." Aubrey stayed quiet, listening. Elliot continued, "I thought this place would always remind me of endings." He looked at Ray. "But now, maybe it's where something starts." Ray didn't speak. Her hand rested on the bench between them. Elliot reached for it. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to say he meant it. She didn't pull away. They spent the afternoon in the breeze. Aubrey fed crumbs to birds. Ray braided her hair. Elliot told old stories that made them all laugh. They didn't talk about hospitals, or job offers, or sickness, just life. Simple, present, real. At one point, Aubrey pointed toward the clouds. "Mommy's probably watching us right now." Ray looked up too. "I think so," she said. "She's not mad you're here?" Ray turned. "Why would she be?" Aubrey shrugged. "Because I like when you braid my hair. And I don't want her to feel sad." Ray gently cupped her cheek. "If she could see you now, she'd be happy you felt safe." Aubrey thought about that, then whispered, "Okay." Later, as the sun began to dip, Elliot reached into the blanket pocket and pulled something small. From inside, a silver ring. Simple, unpolished, real. Ray's breath caught in her throat. But Elliot didn't move closer. Instead, he handed it to Aubrey. She blinked at him. "Is this for me?" He smiled. "Nope. You're just the assistant." She giggled and turned to Ray. "Daddy says you're my ray of sunshine, and that I should ask you something." Ray covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. Aubrey held out the ring. "Will you stay with us?" Ray looked at Elliot. He didn't speak, just waited. Not pressured, not performative, just ready. Ray wiped the tears from her face and whispered, "Yes." Aubrey jumped in place. "We're a family." The birds scattered. The wind danced through the trees. and Ray leaned her head onto Elliot's shoulder. On the same bench where grief once lived. Now it held something else. Something quieter. Something stronger. Hope. Sunday mornings smelled like cinnamon and pancakes. Elliot was in the kitchen flipping batter with one hand, stirring syrup with the other. Aubrey sat at the table, crayons scattered around her, tongue between her teeth as she concentrated on a drawing. Ray stood by the stove watching the two of them, her hand resting near a warm mug of coffee, her eyes still soft with disbelief. It had only been one day since the bench, but everything felt different, not rushed, just right. Elliot placed a pancake on Aubrey's plate, then looked at Ray. "You get the first smiley face one," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that an honor or a punishment?" Aubrey answered, giggling. "It's Daddy's best one." Ray took it gratefully. "Then I'll frame it." After breakfast, Aubrey held up her drawing with both hands. "This is us." 3 stick figures again, one tall with brown hair, one with a bun, one with a bunny and a giraffe in each arm. Above them, the word family, written in bright purple. Elliot knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, can I borrow that for a minute?" Aubrey tilted her head. "Why?" "I want to use it for something very important." He stood up, turned to Ray, and cleared his throat. She looked at him, unsure, but smiling. He held the drawing up like it was a certificate. "She already asked the big question yesterday," Elliot said, his voice steady. "I just need to know, what's your answer?" Ray stared at him, speechless. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Same silver ring. No fanfare, no spectacle, just love. Simple, earnest, open. Ray blinked back tears and whispered, "This time, I'm saying yes with both feet planted." Elliot stepped forward, sliding the ring on her finger. Aubrey clapped her hands wildly. "We're really a family now." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was real. Because somehow, after all the pain, the fear, and the waiting, they had found their way back to joy. Later that evening, sunlight spilled through the windows as Ray stood at the stove, humming. Softly, Elliot was setting 3 plates on the table. Aubrey arranged the utensils with very serious focus. Outside, the wind lifted the wind chimes Lainey had hung years ago. The sound filled the room like a memory, like a blessing. Ray watched them both for a moment, quietly. Then she whispered to herself, "I thought I came here to heal someone else." She turned toward the table. "But I was the one who needed saving. My beautiful Mr. Hearthline family. If the story touched you, if it reminded you that healing is still possible, even after deep loss, then please let us know in the comments. So don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment where in the world you're watching from. We want to see how far this family reaches. And subscribe to be part of the stories we tell next. Until then, may love find you when you least expect it, and may you always have the strength to open the door. See you in the next one.